Okay. Okay. I'm so happy you're all here. So today we're going to be talking about 5 ways to connect and respond so your kids listen willingly. That's what we're after, isn't it? Willing cooperation. So no bribes, no threats, no punishments, and actually better behavior. And today I want to share with you practical tools to de-escalate challenging situations, because I think so many of us, we get in challenging situations or situations and it all escalates and we don't understand why it escalates, and it sort of gets out of control and we end up shouting and the threats and the kids aren't listening. I want to share with you actually why things escalate and how to de-escalate them so we can get back to calm, we can get hold our boundaries and have the willing cooperation we're after. So all this is based on language of listening, the coaching model that I teach. And really, this is the roadmap to better behavior, more cooperation, we shout less, and we have the deep connected relationship that we want. So really, this is a real practical workshop. I want you to come away with 5 practical ways that you can respond to your kids throughout, and it'll be perfect for over the Christmas holidays as well. So when we talk about our kids not listen, when we want our kids to listen, we're not really talking about the act of listening. Yeah, we don't want just our kids to listen to us. What we're really talking about is cooperation. And when we think about that, it sort of changes our perspective on what we're after. Because what we're really asking in those moments is that we want our child to stop what they're doing and do what we want. Yeah, and this can really throw us because we have different agendas. We want one thing and our child wants something else. We have different needs. We want our needs met in different ways. And we have different wants and expectations. And it's kind of like we want our children to stop playing and come for a bath. Or we want them to stop playing video games and come for dinner. Yeah, this is a cooperation most of us find difficult. Or we want them to stop faffing around in the morning and just get dressed. These are the kind of key points throughout the day, these flash points that seem to escalate. And it's easy when our kids are young to start using the bribes and the threats and the punishment, isn't it? Because it's like a quick fix. And I write about a lot of these tactics in my workbook and in my blog about why they don't work. And that's why, it seems like they work in the short term, but over time, when our kids get older, it sort of backfires. And we know it doesn't work with the old tactics because when our kids use it on us, we kind of hate it, don't we? Like when they start threatening us, when they start demanding things, we don't like it either. So this is the way that we are going to use different ways, different tactics. So what has to be in place for our children to listen and cooperate? Anybody want to say in the chat, what do you think the one thing that has to be in place?
Calm.
Yeah, calm helps, but it's not the thing I was thinking. Sylvia, the one thing that has to be in place is connection. Connection is the first step in creating healthy cooperative relationships with children. And so many of us, we don't see this as, connection is so important. It's not about loving your child. It's not even about spending time, because I've no doubt you love your children, you love spending time with them, but it's not the same thing as connection. Connection is the need to feel heard, understood, validated, a sense of belonging, that our loved ones see the best in us. And this is so different than just spending time with our children, because we could spend all day with our children and still not feel connected. And the steps I'm going to be sharing with you today really we respond in a way that builds that connection. So our children feel heard, they feel understood, validated, they're more likely to listen to us. And I want you to think about for yourself as well, like when you're in a relationship with someone, what makes you want to cooperate with somebody else? Willingly. It's this, isn't it? It's feeling like that person sees you, understands you, wants to be with you. This is the key to getting our kids willingly listening to us. So for those of you who don't know me, quickly, this is my girl on the right. This is when she was little. She's now 15. They're both my two teenagers now. My boy is nearly 18 and my daughter, got someone coming now? And my daughter is 15. And she's the reason why I became a parenting coach. Okay, she's like in the front of the book. She wanted everybody to know that I'm her inspiration for becoming a parenting coach, because she used to drive me up the wall. She had the major tantrums, took over family life, and what I call the 0 to 60 kind of child. And everything I tried didn't work. I tried the rewards and the punishments and all the stuff, the well-meaning families. Nothing worked until I came across language of listening, which literally transformed my life and her behavior and our relationship. And I can't be more thankful for both of my children to have the language of listening. Language of listening takes you out of the role of managing your children's behavior and puts you on their side as their life coach. So you're really giving your kids the skills they need to manage their own behavior. So you don't have to. It is so much more easier this way. So yeah, this is the reason I became a parenting coach and why I'm so passionate about passing these skills on to you, so that you don't have to deal with day in, day out struggles and actually enjoy your time with your children. So this is the first step. The first step in responding to our children in a way that works. The first step is seeing things. Has anybody ever seen this before? Just because you're right doesn't mean I'm wrong. You just haven't seen life from my side. And this is so true with children, because our children see the world so differently than we do. And so often we respond to what we see. We respond to our gender, our assumption, our judgments, and we don't pause and see things from our child's point of view. And this puts us against each other. And this is one of the major points of escalations in our communication, and why things, because we see it so true from our point of view. Do you ever see this when you're interacting with your children, how different they see the world? And I always think that with the logic and reasoning, it's like our children really believe that the Father Christmas flies around the world delivering presents. Like, they don't see the world like us. So when we pause and we get out of our judgments and see what they're communicating, what they're telling us, it changes everything. And I want to share a story. This is from page 33 of my workbook. But when my daughter was about 8, I took it and her best friend to see Little Mix in concert, an open air concert. And it was an extra special day because it was their first concert experience. And I really wanted the day to be absolutely perfect, and the tickets weren't cheap, and all the food and the merchandise costs. So I was already a bit frazzled before they even, we waited hours before they finally came on stage. And the moment they came on stage, I heard my daughter say to her best friend, "Oh my goodness, I want to go home. It's stupid." And I really had this split-second thought of, oh my God, after all I've arranged, how dare they be so spoiled and ungrateful? And I was really thinking, I'm just going to grab them. We're going to go home. They don't deserve to watch the show. And it was only when I paused, I chose to set aside my judgments and assumptions. And I used this say what you see step for language of listening. And I was like, "Oh, you don't like it?" And she said, the first thing was like, "Oh, I just can't see anything." They couldn't see properly. And it was first realization that actually it was their first concert, and there were like little ants on the stage. And the only experience she's had of a concert was on TV before. So I was like, oh, of course, it's not that she's ungrateful. It's just that she can't see anything. And it was only when I paused to see it from her point of view that we actually came up with a solution, which was to move to the front of the stage, to the side of the stage, because it was an open air. So we moved to the side, and we had an amazing rest of the time dancing and singing along. But you can see when I paused to see what's actually going on, step out of judgment, you could see how different that was than if I had dragged them out and responded to my judgment of them being rude and unselfish. So you can see this another time. And a client of mine this week, she asked her son to clean up his Lego from the kitchen table before dinner. And when he immediately said no. And how often when our kids say no, don't we get like it puts our back up? They say no when we're like, oh my goodness, don't be disrespectful. Or we're thinking they're being defiant because they say no. And she was ready to argue. She was ready to threaten or punish. But she paused again and she was like, what's really going on here? And she suddenly realized actually he was still in the middle of playing. So she said, oh, it looks like it's still playing. And at the same time, she still wanted a clean table for dinner. But by pausing and seeing it from her point of view first, she was moved out of judgment into understanding. And they ended up finding a solution. Yes, instead of conflict, they had cooperation. So it ended up, she gave a 10-minute warning and he moved his Lego to the floor. Win-win. So when we start with what's going on for our child, then it opens up, they're not defensive, and it opens up to find solutions. So that really is the first step. This is it seeing things from your child's point of view helps you move out of judgments, assumptions, and into finding solutions. So really try it this week. Pause and ask yourself, what's going on for my child? Changes everything. Number 2, children must keep communicating till they feel heard. This is one of the premises in language of listening. It just is a given for children. Do you know when you hear children whine and fuss and whine and get louder and louder? Do you ever see this with your children? They start off whining and fussing, and then it escalates and escalates and escalates. And they get louder and they get more aggressive, or maybe they go and start hitting or biting or kicking. This is an action. This you see it in action. Children must keep communicating till they feel heard. So if you don't hear them, if you don't listen to what they're trying to communicate, we give our children no other option but to escalate their behavior. And this is such a good insight, because when we see the escalation, we can say to ourselves, oh, my child doesn't feel heard. She's trying to communicate something to me. So we can pause. I see this a lot when I'm going around supermarkets. Do you ever see this when the parents are pushing the trolley and the baby's crying or the baby's fussing? And you see this, and we're told to ignore it. How many times I was told to ignore it? Yeah, aren't we told to ignore the bad behavior? That's the opposite of what our children need, because if we ignore it, what are we doing? We're giving our child no other option but to prove to us how upset they are, prove to us what they're trying to communicate. So you see it escalate. And I see this all the time. If you just stopped and said, oh, you've had enough of shopping. You're really tired of being here. You'd much rather be at home. Like, you hate shopping. Like, literally, you say that, and that is like, it's like putting putting water on a fire. It just calms everything down. And so often we don't do that. So when I go up in supermarkets, I hear baby crying. I go up and I'll just guess, even if it gets like, oh, he doesn't want to be here. And they stop crying and they're like, yeah. And that doesn't mean you have to leave the supermarket or leave what you're doing, but it is the first step in de-escalating situations. Just even if you guess, they will tell you. If you say you've had enough of shopping, they might be like, no, I just want to do something else. And then you have better communication. You understand what they're doing, what they want. It seems so simple, the acknowledgement, but really it stops the tantrums in its tracks, because our children feel heard and they don't need to escalate further. You can see this for older children as well. It works with teenagers. If you're planning a family dinner and you suggest to go to a restaurant you like, and your teenager immediately pushes back saying they want to go somewhere else. And you know that where you've chosen, they can eat something. Okay, they've done it before. You know that it's okay, but they're still resistant. And our instinct there is either to ignore it or to go into arguing and convincing. How often do we do this? Oh, come on, it's your favorite place, but you'll be okay. And we go into trying to convince them, or we go into guilt, like, oh my goodness, you're so selfish. I'm taking you out for dinner. Why can't you just? Yes, we go into that kind of stuff, and you can see the back and forth. But in language of listening, if we just pause and we say what you see, is like, it's not your favorite place. You really like to choose somewhere else to go tonight. Just acknowledge without changing your plan, but just acknowledge what's going on. Because you can see, once we've acknowledged what's going on, there's nowhere for that conversation to go. If we go into convincing, then they come back with their convincing, and it's like these two lawyers, and you can see these back and forth. But when we just pause and we say what you see, we acknowledge what's going on for them, and we still hold the boundary. Okay, when we show them that we see their perspective and we understand it, this is what builds a deep connection. Okay, there's no need to escalate that behavior, escalate the conversation. They don't need to argue and dig their heels in to prove how strongly they feel. Because this is another thing. If we push back and we push them into a corner, guess what? They're going to come back even stronger. And then they're going to be more adamant they're not coming. So that when we allow our children to feel what they feel and like what they like, we give them opportunities to be able to move through that frustration a lot more quickly. Okay. Yes. You will notice this when children feel seen and understood, their behavior naturally decreases. You will see the escalation. Has anyone tried this? Have you seen the difference? You do that? Okay. Number 3. is acknowledge your children's intentions. This is a huge one, a huge one. Acknowledge your child's intention is crucial because it helps you see the why behind their behavior, and you recognize the good intentions. Even in challenging behaviors, you shift from frustration to connection because you understand what's behind the behavior. This allows you to feel your child to feel understood, which reduces the defensiveness and opens the door to teaching them better ways to handle situations. If we go in there with judgment and criticism, our children are beginning to be defensive, and then we're not going to be able to guide them to better behavior either. So it happened this way. A friend of mine, a client of mine, she found her daughter climbing. Her daughter's about 6, so climbing on the kitchen counter next to a saucepan of boiling water. And of course, she quickly helped her down because she was like, oh, the boiling water going over her. But her instinct was, first off, her instinct was to tell her off, but she paused instead of reacting immediately. And she, again, used the say what you see step. And she said something like, oh, it looks like you were trying to get something. And she was like, yes, yeah, I was trying to get Dad a cup of coffee. She was trying to get the mug of coffee in the cupboard. And so the mom says, you know what, you wanted to be helpful. So instead of telling her off, she pointed out the strength. The intention wasn't to be naughty and get in the way of, the boiling water, but her intention was to help her dad. So acknowledging her daughter's intentions, we can stay connected instead of creating these tense moments. The daughter feels understood, and then they can brainstorm better ways of her reaching the mark without the boiling water. Win-win. And this is how we also teach our children how to do things in safer ways, but we're also showing them we see the best in them. And what I love, you can see the difference. One with the daughter being told off, what was the message the daughter got about herself? And this way, it's connected because the daughter sees herself in a positive way, that she is helpful, that she is kind, that she was doing something lovely for her dad rather than being told off. And we miss that if we go straight to telling off. We see this also with younger children. We think that when they're shouting or they're arguing with their siblings, if we look at it as them being naughty or them being, rude or not nice or not kind, we might go into action to try and teach them to be kind, to be nice. But actually, what's actually happening there is a child that's learning to stand up for themselves. That's a child trying to communicate their boundaries with their sibling or with you. So when we look at it like that, in a way that we're supporting our children to stand up for themselves in a more constructive way. We're not just stopping it. So we're trying to, it's actually a good thing. If we look at it as a good thing, the intention is I want to stand up for myself. I don't want my sibling in my space, so I want to keep, it's a good thing. So when we look behind the intentions, then we can then help support our children. And this is how, children learn best by problem solving. Once we connect with their true intentions, you are better able to guide them to better ways. This is so true. We can only guide our children when we feel connected. They're only open to our guidance when they feel understood and heard by us. Also, when we see this, if we always rush in, we don't give our children opportunities to problem solve and find their own solutions. So this is so true. When we pause and we see their true intentions, we're not stressed. We're not going down the route of telling off and controlling and the punishing. And we give our children opportunities to find their own solutions, which means we don't have to. So when you get to older kids, like they're finding their own solutions, it's a much easier way of parenting because you're teaching them how to do it themselves, far, far easier than you constantly doing it for them. Okay. Number 4 is, this is a big one, validating your child's likes and wants and don't try to change them. So often we do this, validating your child's likes and wants shows them that their preferences matter, even when you can't meet them, even when you don't agree with them. This builds self-esteem, really understanding what we like and don't want really is the cornerstone of self-esteem and reduces power struggles because they don't feel they need to argue to prove their point. Just like I said, the escalation before, when we show them what they like and reflect it back, they don't have to escalate. Okay, when you accept their preferences without trying to change them, you create space for cooperation and connection. This is so true. You will notice this when you don't go into trying to convince and use guilt to change our ways. Our children are a lot more easier. And they come along. Imagine your kids, you tell your kids that they don't want to visit relatives. And you already said on the weekend you're going to go and visit family, but they don't want to. And you know that staying home isn't an option. And your first instinct might be trying to convince them, oh, come on, they've been looking forward to seeing you. Or we even use guilt. Like how would you feel if you didn't show up? All that kind of stuff. we say to our kids. Yes, it's easy to say this kind of things, but this back and forth usually leads to them digging their heels even more. And I know with my teenagers before, when my kids were younger, before doing this, my daughter especially, she would be like adamant she wouldn't come, and then it would all kick off and it would be like dragging her out the house. This way, when we pause and we say what you see, it's like you really don't feel like going. You'd rather stay at home. You think it's going to be boring. Acknowledge without trying, and you still hold the boundary. Because they don't need to resist or argue to prove their point, you calmly hold the boundary. We're still going. And I get it, it's not what you choose today. They are more willing to cooperate. It is so much easier. It's so much easier that we don't have to go into explaining and over-fixing and trying to get them to change their minds. You see this a lot. I see this a lot also in, like, with little kids, when you're leaving the playground, we can do the same thing. It's like, I know it's time, you don't want to go home now. You wish you could stay at the playground all the time. Oh, Susan. Got more people coming. So when you validate their wants without trying to fix or change them, they feel heard. This really is the deep connection when we feel like our loved ones see the best in us and understand us. This is what reduces resistance and help them transition more smoothly. You're still holding your boundaries, and they respect their preferences and keeps the connection strong. So when we give our kids permission to be, and we don't jump in to fix the situation or use guilt to shame, we give them space they need to adapt, and you will see so much more. It's quicker, so much quicker. Yeah. And it's much easier holding boundaries when we're not trying to convince our kids to like our boundaries. This is a bonus one I want to share with you. This is a huge one because it's so important. When children, what children like is the core piece of their identity, and it's a critical element in their personal compass that will guide them for life. If you think about it, what we like really is what drives us in life. It's our motivation in life. So knowing what we like motivates us to take action. So when we allow our children to like what they like and not try and change them, this is the solid foundation for their personal growth, their self-esteem, and their confidence. And you might have heard of people, trying to find themselves, that kind of thing. Like, I feel a bit lost in life. I don't really know myself. This is what we mean. It's like when we really understand our preferences. So this is a key point of self-esteem. If you want your children to have strong self-esteem, is to really validate what they like and what they don't like. Hi, Susan. How are you doing?
Oh, Jamila.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Thank you. I'm sorry. I know. I'm sorry. I just hopped on, and then I realized I have another meeting at 4 o'clock, so I wanted to catch it. Will there be a replay of this?
Yes, I'll send you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to say hello and send you my love. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, number 5 is, and this comes from language listening. The strength tool in language listening is see the best in your child. Children act according to who they believe they are. This is so critical when we're really stuck and our children not listening. How often do we tell them things like, you never listen, and we tell them they're unkind or they're stubborn, all these kind of judgments, and that they start believing us. So really, when we highlight the best in our kids, they begin to believe it about themselves too. And so when a child believes they're kind, they act kindly. When a child believes they listen, they listen. Yeah, if you say to them, you're such a great listener, they start listening more. I had a client, she used to say to me, my children never listen to me. And I said, and I bet you tell them daily they never listen. And she was like, yes. So if we're constantly telling our children they never listen, but that's what we're going to get. So we want to be telling our children how we see them. So it helps shape them how they see themselves. When we see the best, it helps you shape how they see themselves. When you focus on their strengths and positive qualities, they act in alignment with that identity. It's amazing. So do you know, my daughter started cooking when she was a few years ago, and I'd come in and I'd always see the kitchen a complete mess after her cooking. And it was so easy to walk in there this was when she was about 12. It was so easy to see the dishes piling up, and I was really frustrated. And it was so easy to start pointing out, like, oh my goodness, you're so irresponsible. Yeah, it was like the tip of my tongue. But I paused and I was like, oh my goodness, she's actually really responsible for cooking. Yeah, she's still cooking yourself. You've made a great meal. And that, when knowing that about herself, even if she hadn't tidied it up yet, I waited a moment to see if she could start, if she did start cleaning up. Could you imagine if I went in first off and said, oh my God, you're so responsible? She most probably would have been really angry, most probably would not have tidied up. But pointing out her strength, I then paused and then realized actually she had started cleaning up. But here's another thing, if you, of the older children, if they haven't started doing what you asked, you can ask them, you know, what's your plan for cleaning up? So you can guide them to do that. And the more you do that, then you can pause and you can point out the strength after. Look at you, you're so responsible for cooking dinner, and you even tied it up after yourself. That shows you're so capable, and that shows you're responsible. And that's how she started seeing herself. And then she starts acting more responsibly and more capable. So when we highlight the best in our kids, they begin to believe it about themselves. And this creates cooperation through confidence and helps them see the best in themselves. This is so key. So those are the 5 steps today. I would love to know from you, what was your biggest takeaway from today? Which one